CNN is now learning that Israel was preparing to launch a new significant attack in Tehran when President Trump stepped in earlier this morning. An Israeli source and a U.S. official familiar with the matter say that President Trump told Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to hold off on any more retaliatory strikes. This was during the pair's second phone call in fewer than 24 hours. Let's go now live to Tel Aviv with CNN's Jeremy Diamond. Jeremy, what more are you learning?
Yeah, that's right, Boris. Last night, President Trump did not succeed in his earlier conversation with Prime Minister Netanyahu in getting Israel to hold off and not retaliate against Iran. We saw overnight 2 waves of Israeli strikes inside Iran, one targeting military sites, the other targeting a petrochemical facility after Iran fired multiple barrages of ballistic missiles. But then earlier today, the 2 got on the phone once again, and President Trump again urged Prime Minister Netanyahu not to retaliate further against Iran. And despite the fact that Israel, according to these sources, had several additional waves of attacks planned in Iran, bigger even than what we saw overnight, the Israeli Prime Minister seems to have called those attacks off at the urging of the U.S. president. And then this is what Prime Minister Netanyahu told the public.
At the moment, the fire has ceased, because after we struck the terror regime in Tehran, it stopped attacking us. If the terror regime in Iran makes the mistake of attacking us again, we will respond with force.
And so while we have now reached a point where both Israel and Iran have said that they will not attack each other any further for the time being, there is still hanging in the air this very real possibility of this conflict resuming once again. And that's not only because of what you just heard from the Israeli Prime Minister, but especially because of what we've heard from Iran. Iran's military command saying in a statement that should Israel attack Iran, but also should Israel carry out additional attacks in southern Lebanon, then Iran will retaliate, and will retaliate with more force than what we saw in these initial waves of ballistic missile attacks over the last 24 hours. That is a very new and very concerning new red line from Iran, because it goes much further than what we had heard before. Iran previously warned that should Israel strike Beirut, the Lebanese capital, then Iran would strike Israel. And that's exactly what happened last night. And so now for Iran to be saying that this red line has moved, that it's now about southern Lebanon, presents the real possibility of this conflict resuming, because Israel is vowing to intensify its attacks against the Iranian proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, whose stronghold is indeed in southern Lebanon. And so this remains a very tense situation. That being said, in Israel, the restrictions on activity have been largely removed across the country. Students are expected to go back to school tomorrow after classes were canceled today. But again, Israel's military and the region at large remains on a heightened state of alert, again, because of these threats as it relates to Lebanon. Boris?
It's notable, Jeremy, that Netanyahu did not actually mention the ceasefire in his statement.
The U.S. attacking Iran, Iran now retaliating, a dangerous escalation in the war that's now on day 102. Tehran claiming it's firing missiles and drones towards U.S. targets. An attack after CENTCOM confirms the U.S. hit a number of targets in Iran. So this has been a back and forth, multiple explosions reported now along the Strait of Hormuz. And it all started, Trump says, when Iran shot down a U.S. Apache helicopter as it patrolled the crucial waterway. And that was a significant strike, maybe at the hands of an Iranian Shahed drone, coming amidst a ceasefire that was broken 2 days ago. With missiles hitting back and forth once again between Iran and Israel. The president tonight telling ABC's Jonathan Karl that this is a response to what they did with our helicopter last night. And I believe the response should be very strong, very powerful. And that's what this one is. Now, this is the first time in the war that an Apache's gone down by a country whose military, right, Trump claims to have obliterated. Certainly when it comes to things like the Navy and the Strait, it's been obliterated or left at the bottom of the sea many times, according to Trump. The attack coming just hours after Trump said the U.S. would be declaring victory in Iran in the next 2 weeks, and also that there was a deal, the cusp of a deal with Iran, which is a claim, in fact, that Trump has now made at least 38 times since the war began.
They're begging to make a deal.
I think they want to make a deal very badly.
Iran is dying to make a deal.
We're going to end that war very quickly. They want to make a deal so badly.
We're close to a very good deal.
We're in the final throes of what will be a very, very good deal.
Well, first of all, the Iranians are completely denying that they called President Trump last night and demanded an end to these strikes. Several Iranian news agencies and official channels also saying that that simply is not true. And then as far as negotiating through bombing is concerned, that's also something where Iranian officials are saying that bombing is going to achieve exactly the opposite of what the president wants it to achieve. I actually spoke to a senior Iranian official just a couple of hours ago, and he told me that from the Iranian perspective, they believe that the Trump administration needs to respect the resilience of the Iranians, also needs to respect the military capability of the Iranians as well, specifically looking at the Strait of Hormuz. And I asked that official whether or not there was a chance that the two countries would go back to war. And he said it all depends on the Trump administration right now. If they want to make a deal, if they stop firing, then there can be a deal. However, if they continue to bomb Iran, then a full-on war and a return to full-on war is certainly something that is fairly possible. So right now, certainly these negotiations still in a very difficult state. On their perspective, have said that this was a serious breach of the ceasefire, what happened last night and the night before. At the same time, both sides are still saying that they want to move towards that memorandum of understanding, which we have to say is just the next step in these negotiations. That would end the hostilities between the two countries and then lead to a period of larger negotiations for a possible full peace agreement. But again, right now, especially after what happened last night, it seems a little bit more difficult, but certainly from what was also going on here overnight, we certainly had a busy night here in Tehran. It certainly seems as that diplomatic process is still on. One of the things that happened was that during these overnight hours, even as the bombing was going on, Omar, there was a team of Qatari negotiators here on the ground in Tehran trying to move that process forward. Those negotiators have now left. Going to wait and see whether or not much progress was made on that. Certainly, again, the Iranians are saying they're up for a deal. But at the same time, if the U.S. keeps pressuring and especially dropping bombs, it will have exactly the opposite effect, Omar.
Fred Pleitgen on the ground for us in Tehran. Thank you for the reporting.
We just made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we're going to be subject to finalization of documents. We should get done over the next few days. We'll probably have a signing maybe in Europe. And most importantly, we have a deal that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. The Strait will officially open as soon as we sign, which could be soon, very soon, maybe over the weekend, in Europe. I won't be able to be there, but JD will be there, Vice President, and some of the people. Steve Witkoff did a great job.
After saying there was a deal, President Trump is now lashing out at Iran. In a Truth Social post that appeared just a few moments ago, he called Tehran, and I'm quoting him now, dishonorable for what he's calling inaccurate descriptions of a proposed agreement. He also said they better get their act together and they better do so fast. Let's go to CNN's Kristen Holmes over at the White House. Kristen, what else is the president saying this morning? It's all very dramatic.
Yeah, and Wolf, we're going to get to what he's saying in a second, but I do want to explain how we got here and what it is that he is referring to, because we had gotten a readout of this memorandum of understanding from a diplomat who had been briefed on what was in this document, and some of the key points were this: that it would be a 60-day ceasefire that would include everything, Lebanon included, that the Strait of Hormuz would be opened immediately, and that pre-war levels of traffic would begin again within 30 days, that the U.S. blockade of ports and some Iranian sanctions would all open up as part of this deal, and that it satisfies all the U.S. requirements on the nuclear issue. So that is what we had been reporting. Then we had Iran come out, state media, and give their version of the deal, which looks significantly different. And there are a couple of points in there that are likely to make President Trump angry. One of them, they would not commit to ceding control over the Strait of Hormuz. And the other is that frozen funds, these frozen assets that have been a point of contention for President Trump, they say, Iranian state media, and of course, keep in mind the source here, that the agreement would demand the release of $24 billion in those frozen funds. So now you have President Trump reacting to this, essentially saying that the terms that Iran leaked to the fake news media have nothing to do with the terms that were agreed to in writing. What they said, including their weak, pathetic statement on having a deal, bears no relation to the truth. And with them, there is no such thing as dealing in good faith. I assume what he's talking about when he talks about their weak and pathetic statement on the deal is the fact that we had heard that the response to the deal, or the response to President Trump, was that the text still requires review and finalization. They have been saying that it has not been signed off on. President Trump, of course, saying that everybody was in agreement. So that is what is happening now. And again, we've been down this path before. President Trump says a deal is imminent, and then we see a situation like this where one of the sides starts to backpedal and it all falls through. So we'll see what's going to happen now. U.S. officials are still cautiously optimistic.
Let me just go to how complicated this is. This is the Strait of Hormuz. You can see the overlapping claims of territory, and there's basically now 3 shipping lanes. There's the international route that had gone like this for years. Customary international route has gone like that. That's basically closed because Iran has mined it. There's a new route, which I just mentioned, which CENTCOM has opened up, which kind of hugs the coast here. Goes up UAE. There's a little peninsula here that is actually Oman in UAE territory. It's kind of Oman's Alaska. Makes its geography very, very complicated. And then Iran has its own route, which it says ships must use, which goes along its territory. It goes between 2 islands here, which, of course, the U.S. military has blocked that route. The international shipping route is not being used, and the U.S. military is protecting that route along the coast. That's the current situation. Iran in these negotiations is saying that the route that will be used is its route. It's basically a toll booth route. The U.S. rejects that, and there still seems to be a disagreement in these talks about where that stands.
And walk us through, while I have you, Brett, on this whiplash that we've all been going through. One day, it looks like there's a deal. Next day, no deal, maybe more war. What's going on here?
Look, I've alluded to this because I've done deals with the Iranians, particularly the hard line of that regime, the Revolutionary Guard, the intelligence services. And the way the Iranians, for years, that they try to collapse the power imbalance, so obviously we're a more powerful country, Wolf, by taking possession of, for example, hostages. That's why they use hostages for many years. I've done hostage negotiations. And what Iran does in a hostage negotiation says, we have the hostages, we set the price, and until you either meet our price, we're just going to wait. And time is on their side. I see that's what they're doing here in the Strait of Hormuz. They believe that they are controlling it because they can threaten it with drones. And until we meet their price, they're not going to reopen it. What's so interesting in Iran's state media today, they basically put out their terms of the deal, which would be a massive concession from the United States, basically conceding to all of their demands. The White House is now saying they didn't do that. We basically have 3 options. Option 1, you can concede to Iran's demands. Option 2, you can endure this current status quo, get as many ships out as possible. So far, oil prices are actually they're below $100. This could be sustained for some time. And the third, and some combination of maybe 2 and 3, you use the U.S. military to try to open up these lanes or actually seize control of the strait. That's very, very difficult to do.
Can you just help us better understand what that would take, option 3? Because we had General Wesley Clark on the show earlier this week who argued that's what the U.S. should be able to do right now.
Well, we are sort of doing it in some ways. I just mentioned what we're doing to help those ships hug the coast. I mean, what's happening here in the Middle East is they're finding bypass routes. There's a route that goes from Saudi Arabia across Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea, maybe 5 million barrels a day there. There's a port in UAE called Fujairah, which is right here, a couple million barrels there a day. And now this new U.S. military protected route is also getting out. We don't know how much, but a couple million barrels or so. About 20 million barrels a day before the war. Say you have half that, plus you might have some suppressed demand. That's what's keeping global prices balanced. But just to make this more complicated, it's not just the Strait of Hormuz. This is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And I dealt with this back in 2024 because the Houthis shut that down with drones. You can fire a Shahed drone from 1,500 kilometers away. They can be fired from the Hormuz Mountains, and it's very easy, obviously, to hit a very slow-moving tanker. Very difficult military equation, but our forces out there with CENTCOM are trying to get a handle on this, and that's what's leading to these shoot-downs of drones every night.
So very quickly, before we let you go, when Trump publicly issues a threat to the Iranians, if you don't accept this deal, we're going to bomb you. like you've never been bombed before. We're going to bomb your infrastructure, your petrochemical facilities. We're going to make you crazy. What impact does that have on the Iranians?
Well, the Iranians believe they have options, because one of their options here, they haven't played this card yet, is in the Bab el-Mandeb, and they can also target the infrastructure across the Gulf, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, very vulnerable to Iran's missiles and drones. So Iran believes it still has some cards to play if the military campaign escalates. That's why, Wolf, let's hope there's a deal here. Let's hope. But I am just watching this. I think the two sides are pretty far apart, and until there's actually a signed deal, we're going to be in this status quo. What happened last night? There will be more of that over the coming weeks and months.
President Trump saying a short time ago an agreement with Iran is scheduled to be signed tomorrow. In a social media post, he writes, quote, immediately after it is signed, the Hormuz Strait is open to all. Trump also warning that if the agreement falls through, the U.S. has, quote, the ultimate alternative. A diplomatic source previously told CNN a memorandum of understanding would begin with a 60-day ceasefire and that Iran would then lift its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and the U.S. would lift its blockade of Iranian ports. There is some disagreement, though, here when it comes to the timing. Iran's powerful Revolutionary Guard is denying that Tehran will sign an agreement tomorrow, even criticizing what they called Trump's, quote, unusual insistence on signing a document on that specific day. CNN's Julia Benbrook is at the White House for us. Impossible to ignore as well, Julia, that Sunday, of course, is also President Trump's 80th birthday. The president is offering some more specifics in terms of this memorandum of understanding. More specifics than we've seen from the White House up until now. Walk us through the key takeaways.
President Donald Trump says that an agreement with Iran will be signed tomorrow, and officials familiar with the matter tell CNN that these plans to sign on Sunday came about virtually over the last day as a way to cement the agreement and to avoid last-minute changes. I do want to pull that up for you again to highlight some of the details that he's revealing here. He says that the deal is scheduled to get signed tomorrow, and then immediately after it's signed, the Hormuz Strait will be open to all. He also said that no money will exchange hands and added, quote, at the appropriate time when all is calm, we will go in and get the nuclear dust buried deep under the powerful sunken granite mountains thanks to our beautiful B-2 bombers and their brilliant pilots, and downblend and destroy it, whether in Iran or the United States. Now, that announcement, it came just hours after Pakistan, a key mediator in all of this, said that a deal was close and would likely be signed within 24 hours. It is important to note that both Pakistan and the United States have been optimistic at different times about being close to an agreement on the Memorandum of Understanding, and that Iran is not confirming that this will be signed on Sunday. In fact, Iran's foreign ministry said that while it will not be signed on Sunday, it could be signed in the coming days. When it comes to what we know about this Memorandum of Understanding, if signed, a Trump administration official says that it would then allow for that 60-day period. So in some ways, a deal to make a deal, because that 60-day period would allow them to really get into the details here, but that memorandum would include commitments when it comes to Iran's nuclear capabilities. That would include addressing the highly enriched uranium or the nuclear dust that Trump mentions there. But again, Trump says this will be signed tomorrow. As you mentioned, it is his 80th birthday tomorrow. It is also the day that he will have about 4,000 people with him on the South Lawn watching the UFC fights, a moment that he has long plugged for and advocated for. So it would be a time, I would think, he would want to tout some good news.
All right, Julia, appreciate it. Thank you.